swell with the rain. Let the songs of my heart rise to bless your name.
Greetings. This indeed is the day that the Lord hath made. We choose to rejoice and be exceedingly glad in it. We're grateful and we're thankful for you joining us tonight. We normally use this time as our Bible study time, but tonight we are going to have a conversation. Those of you who've been joining us know that throughout the past several weeks, we've had a series of conversations. We've had a conversation with medical doctors. We've had a conversation with our high school and college graduates. We have had conversation with senior pastors. But tonight is special because we're going to have a conversation with mental health professionals. And so we are excited about this. And so here's what I need you to do. I want you to share. Those of you who are on Facebook, I want you to share this experience, this conversation with those who are in your circle, because I believe it's going to be very vital. It's going to be important and impactful. I believe there's going to be some wisdom and some very helpful principles that we will gain tonight through this conversation. This is something that is quite often not talked about, especially within the context of church. So this is something I believe that is very needed and necessary. And so share that. Those of you on YouTube or even on our website, go ahead and call someone, text someone, let somebody know that they need to tune in to Beulahland.org if you're on our website. But we're glad to have you. And we welcome those of you who are our friends and our special guests. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us on a Wednesday night. There's so many other things you could be doing, so many other programs you could be watching, but you pause to make time to spend with us, and we're grateful for that. And we hope this will be a blessing to you. Listen, you know, at the Beulahland Bible Church, everything we do, we always cover in prayer. So before we go into the conversation, we want God to guide this conversation tonight and cover it. So let's pause for a word of prayer at this time. Let's pray. Father, we thank you and we love you for who you are. Thank you for your all-sufficient grace, that even in the midst of everything that's going on, God, we still trust and we still know that you are sovereign, you are in control, and we know that you will continue to watch over us, provide for us, protect us, God. And God, so therefore we take assurance that you are always with us. Now will you guide us in this conversation tonight, God? We thank you for our special guests, our panel, who are sharing their time with us, God. We pray that you would give them wisdom, that you would give them discernment as they share with so many who are joining in tonight, God. And I pray that even those who may be in the struggle, who may be overwhelmed with anxiety, those who are battling depression or any form of mental health that they're struggling with, God, I pray tonight will be a blessing to them, and that because of this conversation, if nothing else, God, they will acknowledge the fact that they need help and they will seek out for it, God. We ask it in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. Well, again, we want to say thank you to our wonderful panel who have paused and taken some time out of their busy schedule to share with us on tonight. And some faces you do know, and some faces you may not know. And so we don't want to assume. So we're going to introduce our panel for tonight. And so I believe the best way to introduce them is to allow them to introduce themselves. And so let's go around and just find out who we have tonight. We'll start out with Dr. Gordon. Will you just give us an introduction of yourself?
Absolutely. I'm Dr. Shannon Gordon, and I have the privilege at this time of leading River Edge Behavioral Health that serves Macon and the surrounding counties, as well as River Edge Foundation. By training, I was a teacher who became a social worker who ended up getting a doctorate in leadership. So that's a little bit about me.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, thank you. Paula Sims, member of Beulahland Bible Church. Will you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Paula Sims. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I'm also the CEO of Community Development Systems, which is a behavioral health agency here in Macon, Georgia, servicing child and adolescents and families who suffer from emotional and behavior disorders. I also have a specific training dealing with trauma-focused therapy in the EMDR model. And I have several years of working in other social services fields since graduating from college. Thank you, and I'm glad to be here.
Wow, thank you. Monica Swain.
Hi, I'm Monica A. Swain, and I'm the owner of Monica A. Swain LCSW LLC, and it is a counseling and consulting practice where we deal with short-term solution-based problems as it relates to the clinical piece of counseling, and we also focus on coaching as well as training with organizations. I have a license in clinical social work, and I've been practicing in the area probably for about 23 years now.
Wow. Well, thank you for being with us tonight. Thank you.
Absolutely.
And then last but not least, one of our own members of the Beulahland Bible Church, Dr. Murphy. I believe you're on mute, Dr. Murphy.
I am. I just was trying to be obedient. Thank you, Pastor, for the opportunity to be here and with the other people who are speaking here tonight. I'm Joshua Murphy, and I've had the pleasure of a great career. I'm presently the COO of the Fulton DeKalb Hospital Authority, which actually owns Grady Hospital. My background is in both in clinical and counseling psychology. Used to be in private practice, used to be a staff psychologist up in Rome, Georgia, just many things, but got this opportunity, Dr. Gordon, to also do studies in leadership. Became a school superintendent, so had a great career, and I give it all to God. So I'm glad to be here tonight to have this discussion, because this is one of the most talked about discussions right now in the nation, the piece on mental health. What do we do?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It is. And we're going to talk about it tonight. And we, again, thank you guys for being a part of this discussion. I want to start here because although there's a lot of talk about mental health, I don't want to assume that everybody that is tuning in tonight knows what that term actually mean or the details of what mental health entails. So I want to make sure that everybody is on one accord as we converse about mental health. So I think a great starting place would be is to simply ask the basic question: what is this term mental health all about? What does it consist of when we speak and use that term mental health? And so I guess we'll open that up for discussion if whoever wants to reach out and grab it.
I don't mind, Pastor. Let me jump on it. When people think about that, I'm glad you started there. Mental health is just like physical health, but I don't want them to confuse mental health with mental illness, because those terms are exclusive in a way. They're not the same, but they do interchange in a sense. A person says that I have mental health, that means how are you mentally? How are you doing? How is your thinking? How is your well-being when it comes to some of the mental things? Whereas mental illness, on the other hand, based on state law, simply deals with how do you handle the ordinary demands of life. And inside of that, there is a mood or thought disorder that's defined. Moods such as depression, moods such as a bipolar disorder, a manic disorder, all of that. A thought disorder, such as you hear people talk about schizotypal personality, schizophrenia. So you start looking at that. And so you don't want people to confuse mental health, because I tell people all the time, check on your mental health. Because if you had a pain in your left side of your body, you'll go to the doctor. But if you start saying, my memory, I'm losing, you might say, well, I just had a pass. I'm just doing that because I'm getting older. You should also check on your mental health just as you do that physical health. And so hopefully that explains it some.
Wow.
I have a little bit more of a simple way of putting it. I see mental health as a way that a person interacts not only with himself, but with the world, and how that comes out emotionally, mentally, and behaviorally would be my definition.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yes, sir. Actually, this was part of my doctoral dissertation. And it's really well-being associated with a person realizing his or her own potential, coping with the normal stresses of life, working productively and making positive contributions to the community, or social, psychological, and emotional well-being that includes thoughts, feelings, and behavior, as well as approaches to stress management, decision-making, and relationships with others.
Okay. Now, I heard Dr. Murphy say that you ought to check on your mental health as you would your physical health. And we all know that really just doesn't happen to the average person. Rarely do we just go check on our mental health. And you know, I'm thinking about my own personal life. You know, I had a traumatic experience as a child, 7 years old. I was a hostage in a robbery. And my father being a pastor at that time, being in church, he prayed for me, laid hands on me, and the church prayed, and they believed God, he would heal me. And I can say I'm better, but the fact is that there were lingering effects for years that I wrestled with mentally. And I think about how much better I would have been if we would have partnered the spiritual aspect with the professional assistance that is available. Yes, I believe in prayer. I believe that God is a healer. I believe that God can change situations and circumstances, but at the same time, I also believe that God put people in position to be able to assist and help and partner in the process toward healing. And so, and I think there's also this stigma, especially within the context of church, that we don't, one, talk about mental health, and two, we don't encourage people to go seek help pertaining to mental health and seeing a professional in that regard. I do as a pastor, and I believe I do because of my own personal experience. My own personal experience, knowing what I went through in the years I suffered in silence. You're talking about somebody who for years struggled even with suicidal thoughts. And yet God, he got me through that. But I believe I suffered when I really could have gotten some assistance. And so I want to talk about this stigma that sometimes prevents people from being open, honest, and transparent about their private struggle and not getting the help that is needed. And I'm just really thinking about this in the context of we're in the middle of a pandemic. We have so many things that are going on. And so the aftermath of this, of people trying to say, go back to the what's normal, and we created this new normal, it's kind of hard to just act like we didn't go through anything. And there are going to be a lot of people struggling in the aftermath of this. So I want to address this thing of this stigma of people not really reaching out and getting help. And so, Monica, if you would take lead on that.
Absolutely. First and foremost, I think the stigma is centered around lack of awareness. People tend to not gravitate towards things they don't really understand or things that are not familiarized or popular to them. Secondly, when you talk about reaching out and getting help from a professional, you're also talking about a person having to possibly overcome trust issues. And if you're dealing with someone who may have been traumatized, that's something that they have to overcome, coming to this person who's called a professional, but also labeling or coupled as a person that I don't know. And so getting into that headspace and that mindset to be able to trust that person. And secondly, just having environments to say that it's okay. For so many years, I think mental health was misdefined, if you will, as something related to something being wrong, someone being out of order, or someone being mentally unstable. But when we look at mental health, I like to look at mental health just like I do physical health. And when I do presentations on mental health, I talk to people in the spirit of how they look at their annual. We don't go to our physicals and our annuals every year specifically because something is wrong. We just want to do an update from last year to make sure everything is still in check. And so I try to promote it that way, as to not making it look like it's taboo or that something has to be wrong with the person in order to seek professional help. And I think if we did more with awareness, having platforms like this and talking more to the community, perhaps when nothing isn't wrong, but educating and talking about mental health as a preventive mechanism, an educational piece as it relates to our overall mental health. I believe that if we educated more, we would probably see the embrace a little more. And lastly, what I want to say about the stigma, I think that it's environmental. I think sometimes it's cultural, because if you've grown up in an environment where you heard things like, we don't go outside of our home, we talk about our issues within, we are a private family, then sometimes that becomes learned behavior. And so we know that as we grow through our 8 developmental stages of life, some behavior that we learn is unlearned and some behavior remains the same.
Wow. Excellent. Someone else?
I echo what she's, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, ladies first. I can wait.
I echo what she said about we tend to stigmatize what we don't understand. And also there is a tendency to think I'm the only one struggling with this issue, when in reality, 1 in 5 people experiences a mental health challenge at some point in life. We say it this way: if it's not you, it is somebody you love. And so understanding that that which affects us is common to man helps to break down the stigma, I think.
Yeah, in this nation, thank you, Dr. Gordon and Dr. Swain. When you think about this whole concept, you have to help people also, as we change the conversation, help them change the nomenclature. Someone gets sick and someone says they had a stroke or a heart attack, people come visit you quickly at the hospital. But instead, we stand out with the public opinion judges in the world, and we use terms that's not used in the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders by the psychiatrists, psychologists, and social workers in this country. And we allow people to use words like crazy, like stupid, things that shouldn't be used, like a spaz. And they are seriously dealing with versus living with a mental illness or living with some form of mental health. We have to help the public understand. Let's change the conversation to help. Let's better understand that. And then this used to get me out as I was growing up, Pastor. People come and say, when they did not know because of ignorance, they'll say, that boy or girl, they've been touched. And as a child, you say, touched, what does that mean? They've been touched by what? Touched by an angel. I don't know, but they would always take something out of context. And that was something, as Dr. Swain said, it was taboo to have that kind of conversation, even in your home and definitely outside the home.
Wow, and that's powerful, because we actually never approach mental health in that fashion. As you were saying, that someone goes for some physical condition or what have you, people go in support, and there's an overwhelming outpour of love for their person, stroke, heart attack, those type of things. But if someone who is trying to see about their mental health, there is this idea of, well, there's something going on with them. They're not wrapped too tight, or there's something, they might be out of their mind. And the fact is, I believe that we have to address that very issue. I remember, I think it was 2 years ago, I taught a Bible study series on mental health, and I was dealing with this aspect of depression. And I was just overwhelmed. And it started out with just me teaching. I was only planning on teaching one lesson. And because of such an overwhelming response of people coming up to me one by one, privately, Pastor, you don't understand. That's what I've been dealing with. And then just go ahead and seeing the need that I need to address this as a church. And when I did that, and I shared my story and how there was such a burden lifted among the people, and realizing that it's okay to admit there's a need for help. And so I do believe we have to educate. We have to educate our community and let them know this is something to seek out help, or to even go get to have some type of checkup concerning your mental health. it doesn't mean that there's something wrong. You're just trying to make sure everything is good. And so I think that's necessary. Paula, did you want to say something? I don't know if I missed you or not.
No, I think the rest of the panel hit the nail on the head, and so I'm just going to go with that.
Okay, so there are some questions that our congregation submitted, and I want to stay true to our theme, because these conversations are actually led by what our congregation really want to know. And so they submit questions, and so we're going to allow that to guide the remainder of the conversation. And I'll come back I was going to wait to the end to do this, but let me just also do this now, since it's on my mind. I don't want to forget, because we talk about the stigma, right, of encouraging people, educating people about pursuing professional help. Many, especially within the African American community, oftentimes are challenged because financially they can't afford to go and pursue some type of professional mental health assistance. And so if there's a person in our congregation who is in need of it, if they want to reach out, what resources are available to help them if they are financially going through something where they can't, afford it, but they are in need of it? Can you give us some guidance in that area?
River Edge Behavioral Health has a contract to serve folks who don't have health insurance. Okay, and between 8:30 and 2:30 Monday through Friday at 175 Emory Highway, they can present without an appointment to be seen. Also, we operate a 24-hour site for folks in crisis at 60 Blandy Way in Milledgeville. We would ask that they bring their ID and some form of proof of income with them, because those are things we have to meet the state contract requirements. And we also do things like help them get on Medicaid, help them secure whatever public benefits they may be eligible for. So please don't let lack of insurance or resources be a barrier to seeking help. We're here to help you.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Any other resources available?
The other one, Pastor, is one that I really like. There is a state national alliance. It's called NAMI, National Alliance on Mental Illness. Even though they could charge, but they could also find, as Dr. Gordon said, places where people can actually get this. It's free. And their number here in Macon, Central Georgia is 478-569-2013. And there is a Georgia National Alliance on Mental Illness, and that is 770-234-0855. And those resources are there. People just need to reach out and really actually go there and try.
Dr. Murphy, say that one more time, those numbers and the places one more time.
And I'll slow it down, sir. The National Alliance on Mental Illness, that number is 478-569-2013. And the Georgia NAMI, National Alliance on Mental Illness, is 770-234-0855.
Thank you. Thank you.
And Pastor Kelly, I just wanted to add that on the private sector side of counseling, there's a website called psychologytoday.com, and there are several therapists that advertise on there that do sliding scales as well as pro bono. So I think it goes back to having the conversation to call and let people know where you are and what you need. And also within the private sector community, a lot of times if you don't get someone that you personally picked, they may be able to rotate or send you to someone who can help you. But that's certainly an option to call and to ask about sliding scale, and if there are absolutely no financial resources available for the client, they can certainly ask if the office offers pro bono services.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
And Pastor, can I change one of those numbers? I got excited in a sense because I know a colleague and I gave her number first. It's called Sound Advice Counseling, LLC. And that number was the 478-569-2013. But the NAMI Central Georgia, that's actually located in Warner Robins, is 478-328-0508. So I want to make sure I cleared that up, and someone make a call and said, hey, you're not NAMI. So I want to clear that up to be straightforward. So those are the three numbers that you have. And those are good lines to communication to help people who might be living with mental health or mental illness.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. So here's a question that many of them just had to compile them together. They were pertaining to extreme anxiety and dealing with anxiety and stress. And I guess the question then is, what are the warning signs? Because, you know, a person can be stressed and don't even realize it and overwhelmed before they even know it. So what are some warning signs for being overwhelmed with stress and anxiety? Paula, we'll start with you.
Okay, so I think there are several different ways you can look at it, because what we had not touched upon is that from a mental health standpoint, there are a lot of different ways that we can come to the realization that mental illness exists. For me, when we talk about stress, I particularly like to come from the biological perspective of why people are stressed, which we then begin to look at the sympathetic and the parasympathetic systems. And that's that fight or flight. So a lot of times when we stay for prolonged periods of time in the fight stage, it's only really, we're supposed to be there for the moment to get us out of the emergency situation and move back into safety. But nowadays, and just with everyday life situations, we're staying in that stage of fight for prolonged periods of time, which is causing a negative effect on our bodies and just the way we respond to a pot dropping on the floor. You know, they're just, your response time and how you respond is very different. And so it just depends on the person as to when you're talking about your stress levels. Sometimes you have extreme stress, you're talking about forgetfulness, tension, and that can easily fall over into depression when you are feeling fatigue and a lot of other things, problems concentrating. It's just, it depends really on the individual, but those are just some general kinds of things that you would pretty much see when we're talking about from the biological perspective of stress and the alarm system and the fight or flight and how that impacts how we feel physically.
Wow. All right. Dr. Gordon?
Well, people can have heightened feelings of worry or fear, feeling excessively sad or low, problems with their thinking, concentrating or learning, mood changes in mood. Paula did a great job talking about how when your body stays at a 7 out of 10, what might have elevated you to a 2 now becomes a 9. So extreme irritability or anger, changes in sleeping or eating, those kinds of things, as well as overuse of substances like alcohol or drugs.
Anybody else?
Pastor, can I go to this piece by Thomas Rahe, R-A-H-E? He actually has a stress scale. That stress scale can show you if a person lost a family member, what that stress level would be. If a person was getting married or arrested, which is very strange. Person getting married the day of the marriage and being arrested actually has the same stress level, which can lead to other things of anxiety or even panic attacks, as Dr. Gordon referred to, even having difficulty sleeping. Having difficulty sleeping can also add to such things as nightmares, sleepwalking. All of those things are associated with that whole piece. So this is a real important area. And a lot of times people don't always realize this because they can actually have chest pains, they can perspire, they can just almost, as people talk about losing it, they really don't know what to do with it. And sometimes it's not always random. It could happen based on something just because they fear. Getting on the stage and looking at a speech. Now you know there was writing on the speech, but all of a sudden you're so anxious about it and you don't even see any words. Or before a test, you talk about the whole concept of having test anxiety.
Wow. So if those are the warning signs, if a person recognizes, okay, I am overwhelmed with stress. So what advice would you give a person right now? This pandemic, folk are stressed out. And so what advice would you give a person who is overwhelmed with anxiety and they're stressed? What advice would you give them to deal with, finding some form of relief or being able to calm down or decompress or what have you to deal with the stress?
I would say, first of all, try some self-care techniques, adult time out, finding healthy distractions like comedy, a good book, writing. So for some people, it may be fresh air or just listening to that soothing music. I would try that first. And if the intensity still remains, I would say go definitely to reach out to your medical physician first and let your medical physician know what's going on. But also, I want to stress this. If it's extreme and you feel like everything you've tried on your own was not working, please ask your medical doctor to give you a referral to a mental health doctor. So many times with people with mental health, they've been misdiagnosed. And as a result of being misdiagnosed, they're also being improperly medicated. So I would say start at home with things that you can do, incorporate into your routine. Muscle relaxation is another. Just kind of slowing things down, getting an adequate amount of rest. And something that I personally do myself, 2 hours before going to bed, I look or listen at anything that requires me to think or to make a decision. And I take those last 2 hours of every night to just decompress from my day so that I can get an adequate amount of sleep. But I would say that start with just some self-help techniques. And if that doesn't work, certainly reach out to a medical professional. However, please tell your medical professional that if you feel like you need additional care, to please go to a mental health professional, because that has certainly been a historical problem with mental health across the board being misdiagnosed.
Wow, thank you. Anybody else?
Exercise is a great option for relieving tension, and it also helps with depression. Limiting caffeine, especially if you're feeling anxious. Practicing deep, slow breathing. Figure out what are some of the things that you can let go of. Praying and meditation. Having yourself a good cry. Making a gratitude list. Reaching out to friends, positive friends. All of those things are helpful. We were made for connection.
Good, good. Now, someone asked about panic attacks. They're dealing with panic attacks, and so they wanted to know what causes panic attacks, and what can they do to prevent panic attacks. And so, in dealing with panic attacks, they're overwhelmed with that. So what causes panic attacks, and how can they prevent and deal with that, where they are feeling closed in, and especially now when we are, most of being quarantined, and we have the stay-at-home order for a period of time. They're dealing with the panic attack. So how do they? What is it? What causes it, and how do you prevent that?
Let's talk first of all about what is a panic attack, because that's a term that people kind of throw around sometimes. When they say something surprised me, they might say, I almost had a panic attack, in colloquialism. But in reality, to meet the diagnostic criteria, it's sudden feelings of terror or panic are the hallmarks of panic disorder. They can happen at any time, anywhere, and without warning. And once somebody's experienced them, it's not uncommon that they begin to live in fear of it happening again. And that fear can become kind of consuming. It's more common for women than men, and usually starts in young adulthood when a person's under a lot of stress. Physically, you have a fast heartbeat, chest pain, breathing difficulty, and dizziness. People can literally feel like they're going to die, but they're not going to die, but they feel like they're going to die. So that's what a panic disorder really is from the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders perspective. And let me just say this, all mental illnesses are biologically based brain disorders that respond well to research-proven treatment. So it's something that happens in the brain, and what's known to be best for panic disorders, counseling can teach skills to recognize and change thinking patterns before the panic sets in. Medications can also help. And the research says that combining appropriate medications, not benzodiazepines, because those are addictive,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And talk therapy are often the most effective. Then those self-care strategies that we talked about, like limiting caffeine and other stimulants, and then progressive relaxation, some kind of mindfulness practice or yoga can also be really helpful.
Okay. Anybody want to add to that?
She started talking about, Dr. Gordon started talking about and naming some, but one, I think, Pastor, you were about to say is one that people really fear this piece with closed spaces, and the word fear is important here, and that's claustrophobia, where a person just cannot be so, and you'll hear people talk about a cabin fever, they just can't deal with it for a period of time. And the other, it would be tough, and I don't know of one in all the practice I've done to have both. I've had claustrophobia in one person, but never had both claustrophobia and agoraphobia in a person. Agoraphobia is when that person steps outside and the whole world, everything looks huge. But she's exactly right. When you look at it, that person almost feel like they're losing it, that they're dying because they could have those chest pains. There was a guy who wrote a book on motivation, and he says when a person experiences a fear of something, the emotion kicks in, the feeling kicks in, the whole piece, and it's like they are thinking something. It's called the James Lang theory. They're actually thinking it's going to occur. If you start perspiring or the breath, then they get more anxious and more panicky in the sense of, I'm probably dying because I'm having this, when in fact they're actually not. So his theory says, if you start feeling and have some of those symptoms, saying in your brain, now my brain is listening to my body, so I'm probably going to get ready to die, when in fact that's not the case. But it's something that you have to talk to people about and kind of teach them step by step how to handle this. If you have this fear, how to remove yourself away from it. But I love the piece called self-help, but then that clinician can give you cognitive behavioral therapy to help you deal with that whole piece of panic.
I want to shift gears just a little bit, because because when you're dealing with mental health, most time we're just, you know, most people thinking about adults, but young kids deal with it as well. And when you think about it right now, as a parent, thank God my kids are college age kids, but parents who have the smaller kids who cannot go to school, limited in not being able to go out and play with all their friends, having to stay at home. What do you say to parents who are dealing with kids who are stressed out because their whole world has been changed and their whole social life of being able to go to school and to church and all of the places, going to the ball games and different things, now they're being told, no, you can't go anywhere. We have to stay home. You can only interact with people within your house physically. So how do you address that with parents who are having to deal with kids who are stressed out they're just stressed out by the fact that they can't socialize, they can't get out, and they're stuck at home? How do we guide our parents through this as well?
I think the first thing is children respond differently in their behaviors and how they react to stress. So I think it's really important that parents are educated of what stress or depression or anxiety or worry or fear looks like in children. And after they kind of understand what it looks like in their child, because it is a subjective, person-centered kind of focus, then you would go in to help them to try to find ways of maybe dealing with or minimizing, you know, the fears or whatever the anxiety is, and given different kinds of activities. And here it is. It's not, you know, it's a different world for all of us. Like this has been a long time that I myself, and I love being at home, but you know, it has just become monstrous for me to deal with being in the home. So I can imagine a full family with different age kids and different needs that those kids are wanting. And so I think the first thing is being organized. They have to have a support system. You know, there are going to have to be some taking turns to do things where, you know, sometimes the older kids may be caring for the younger kids while mommy or daddy takes a break, or, you know, so what are you going to do for little Johnny that's 5 and that's 13? And you come up with those different kinds of activities, you know, and then that quiet time, and then that family time, and then, you know, whatever it is, but you have to be specific to your child. But there also needs to be a balance and an equilibrium so that the parents are not feeling overwhelmed. Because clearly what we see every day, and a lot of people don't understand, that generally when children come in to therapy, parents automatically feel, okay, we're bringing them in to get them help. When the reality of it is, the child is really just the identified patient. And it is telling us that there is an issue in the system, right, that has to be fixed. So it's a family system thing where we have to look at everybody in the family and how they're functioning, because there is a lot of overlapping, you know, and of course there has to be those line drawings between parents and children, but there definitely is the overlapping. And at a time with COVID-19 and being so secluded, you know, in small places, that really can be a challenge, and you have to become very, very, very creative.
Wow. Dr.
I
Gordon?
echo what Paula said in terms of the importance of being really planning. Just like both pre-COVID-19, family life goes better when there's a plan about what's for supper and who does what and all that kind of thing. It's even more intensified now. if there's access to the internet, I've seen children have a lot of success with Zoom parties with their friends. Like they decide, I don't know, today we're going to play dress up, and and Jean is at her house and Lakita's at her house, and everybody's on Zoom, and so you're doing it at each other's houses, but you're still together and able to talk. Using Zoom for children's activities to foster connection. The other thing I would say is making time for activity. I don't have to tell any parent in the room that children have energy that has to go somewhere. And so having a plan for activity is important.
I like the conversation, Pastor, around being creative in the activities. You can also have support groups for children, with children doing what they're doing and teenagers. But the other piece, where you can with families, you can take children out to the sidewalks and do chalk drawing. Just give, but the piece you were saying, planning, making a schedule. This is the time we get up. This is the time we're going to do spelling or mathematics. And I make a recommendation. Having been a school superintendent, something happened. The reason I go to them, I found out that AT&T was now paying for it. And it is Khan Academy that deals with all ages for mathematics, all the way from 2 to 18. But there's also SmartWorks that deal with this whole piece on learn coding, where you can be at any age to help students still continue with their education. So I'm just taking it to the brain development level so that young people are not just stuck doing one thing, but they have a host of things they can do throughout the day to keep them busy.
And one last thing I would like to add is to have the conversations with the children on their age level, to just explain to them that although they feel like this is probably the worst thing ever and they're making so many huge sacrifices, but just have that conversation to ensure why they're having to make those sacrifices at this time. Because if they are a certain age group, and understanding safety and understanding that they like their friends and they wouldn't want their friends to get sick and they wouldn't want to get sick from their friends, but just having a conversation on their developmental stage and let them know that this is certainly not a punishment, but have the conversation to educate them where we are now and why we are now.
Wow, that's good. That's good. That's good. Even with that, staying in the same vein, we're in July. And July oftentimes is vacation time. This is the time. And I know for me, in July, I vacate. And when I say vacate, I don't just leave physically. When I go on vacation, I tell Beulahland all the time, I love Beulahland to death. But when I'm on vacation, Beulahland is not on my mind. I vacate. My mind, I completely disconnect, and my wife loves it because I'm locked in 100%. Well, right now, I just realized how important vacation has been and how significant it's been in my life, because I can't do it. In the places I normally go, we can't go. And looking at that with families who normally have the opportunity to go to the family reunions and those moments where they get to get out and go see the world and have that experience to escape their reality for that moment, not having that in this season and this time. How do we deal with that? Because it's something about vacation that just kind of just give you that fresh energy and that fresh perspective, and it just rejuvenates you. Not having that now, how do you deal with that now? And my wife and I, we drove to Atlanta just to drive and come back just to do something other than sit in this house. And so, what do you do, Dr. Murphy? What do you do?
Hey, Pastor, you just answered it. We drove down to Lake Oconee, hotel closed, and Lingalonga Steakhouse closed, but just the mere fact of getting out. But you still work with parents to try to, ask them to be creative in terms of what they're doing with young people, or all of the entire family, what you can do. I say families should FaceTime. We tried that Sunday. We actually went into a Zoom with all my brothers and sisters, and it's 11 of us. And just to see people, it was just a lot of fun, even though people tease. They got on the phone and say, hey, you need a haircut. One got on the phone and say, oh man, your beard is great. But it was the fact that we got a chance to interact. It kind of put us in the same room. And the beauty of it, you get a chance, you can stretch that Zoom as far as you want to and look at all of the methods, whether it's GoToWeb, whether it's GoToMeeting, whether it's Google. Just use that just to reach out to family and do what we used to do when we couldn't even afford it. We could open up something and say, hey, I'm going there. One day I'm going to go to Hawaii. You know, it's kind of like get creative and start dreaming. When this is all over, and I know we say the new normal, but the current normal we're in, it's going to impact how we do business later on. And we need to think about it. What do we do next? I just think that we do what you just did. Just take a ride. You don't have to get out of the car. You know, and make sure you fill up. You don't have to have any gasoline. Just keep on doing what you're doing. That you would run out, but do some of those things and think creatively what you can do. You can, again, I go to those support groups. You can do family, you can do friends, you can just get people together, having those conversations, just to keep, as we're talking about, keeping your mental health on tap, and even having discussions. How are you doing health-wise? How are you doing with this? What are you doing? Just having that conversation with family and friends. Are you checking up on your diabetes? It was like checking in. And we call them touch points. And even if we can't see each other, we can pick up that cell phone and make a call, and having those touch points with friends. And then the other piece, having prayer time, having prayer meetings with each other, that we can do that to push forward during this time.
Good. But it still doesn't beat going out and seeing the beach in person. But we got to get past a virtual background. Listen, we're running short on time, so I want to get to a couple of more questions that are I believe, very essential. During this whole pandemic, we've had many members in our church who've experienced bereavement and have the unfortunate reality of having to grieve during a time where not only were we in the pandemic, but because of the pandemic, it completely changed how we could have the homegoing services, and weren't able to have the traditional funeral. Some of them had to have graveside funerals with only 10 people, 12 people. And there were some were not able to even go to the funeral because of COVID-19. And so to that family that has had to deal with the reality of losing a loved one in the midst of a pandemic, and at the same time still grieving. And sometimes I know the funeral is not closure, but it does provide something in the process, especially when having people to come and that support system and family traveling and that sense of togetherness. It helps to have that overwhelming support. So what do you say to those individuals who are grieving during that time, who've experienced bereavement and are grieving even now in this pandemic and dealing with that? What do you say to that? Monica, you start.
Okay, first and foremost, I would say, please acknowledge the way you feel. No suppression, no keeping it to yourself. Talk to the others that are affected by the loss. And certainly looking at, traditional styles versus the style that we've been forced into, and seeing it as something beyond control. I think a lot of times people mentally as well as emotionally get stressed out about some things sometimes that they can't control, and they may wish they could have controlled so they could have had a different outcome. But certainly having the conversations, staying connected to other people, If you feel that there's something that's unresolved within you beyond the loss, certainly reach out to a support group. Support groups are still going on virtually now, so definitely that is a resource. And lastly, I would say too, that during this time and all of these different adjustments that we've had to make, keeping with routines. And when you're talking about grief and loss, one thing I know that people do when someone has passed in the family, they bask in those memories and those fun times. And I would say definitely embrace those moments and don't let something that people are not able to control overshadow something that they can control, like really pivoting a little bit, if you will, from a cognitive perspective, and dealing with those emotions in a healthy way, and certainly not alone.
Wow, that's helpful. That's helpful. Someone else.
Really, our traditional funerals are designed to honor the life and to foster connection and support. And so it's helpful to think about, okay, I can't do what I used to do, but what can I do to honor this life? It, and whatever form that takes is okay. Secondly, I can't get support the way I used to, but how can I get the support that I need? And then for church families and other families, when someone has a loss, um, it's often not helpful to wait for them to ask for help or to ask for the support. Go ahead and offer. Be creative about how you offer in a new way.
Wow. Great, great, great. This is good stuff. Anyone else? Now let me ask this question here. I tell the members of our church, because I believe in this season and time, you have a lot of people, yes, we're quarantined, but there are some folk who are alone. They're living alone. And I tell our members, hey, let's check on one another. We have a large church. And so it just can't be pastor and staff. It's going to take members checking on other members and making sure that we all are encouraging each other through this pandemic. But also we know that sometimes people go through some dark seasons. And I know personally that there are times when, those suicidal thoughts, when you're in that dark place, sometimes, it continues to cross your mind. What are some signs for those who, I encourage them to, hey, let's check on one another. For those who, who care for others who may be, challenged, find themselves in those low places, what are those signs to look for when a person is on the verge, who are contemplating suicide? What are some signs, our members should look for when they are, trying to be there for one another and care for one another, but yet maybe there's somebody that's really in a dark, dark place? What are some signs that we can help them to look for to make sure that we can prevent those tragic moments? Anybody?
Depression, sadness, change in sleeping or eating, unable to articulate joy in any aspect of life. Please don't be afraid to ask people. If you have a suspicion, don't be afraid to ask the question, are you thinking about hurting yourself? Because your asking the question will not prompt them to think of it. If they're not, it may give them permission to acknowledge it if they are. And if they are, please persuade them to seek help and refer them. And there is a 1-800 number that is available 24 hours a day for suicide prevention, and I'm going to give you that now. It is 1-800-273-8255. And particularly if somebody's like appears to be getting their affairs in order, giving away precious things, those are serious, serious warning signs.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else?
I just want to add to what she
say-
stated in as it relates to change in routine, extreme change in routine, and really not connected to a reason to do so. And one particular area I think sometimes we don't look at enough is when a person is overly happy or deflecting and just saying everything is okay when you know things may have not been okay. Because when we look at history and research, a lot of people who actually have been successful at suicide, their last conversations were joyous conversations. The people who reached out and were connected to them had no idea that they were suicidal. So look at the change of routines, being overly happy or deflecting like all is well with them, especially when you know there's been a history of problems in the past, and also check-ins, and not necessarily announced check-ins. You can have check-ins with people, and you can generate a support system if there is a family member or a friend in a circle and you are aware of some historical factors. You can get together and do a rotation in your check-ins just to keep a steady monitoring to make sure someone hears the voice, sends a text, receives a text, and just make sure that person is in a safe place.
Swain, I like exactly what you said about that. And there's a term that I use, Pastor. When someone changes what they normally do, and then especially when this person has been close to you and you ride by and say, hey, let's go to the mall. Hey, let's go shoot a little basketball. Hey, let's go over here to the movies. And that person consistently says to you they can't go. That term is called melancholy. Melancholy means this person separates themselves because they are prepared not just for the ideation of suicide, but actually they are prepared to leave. Dr. Swain was so right about too often people think you actually commit suicide when you're real depressed. That's not the case, because you can be in what is referred to, when you hear the word bipolar depression, it used to be just mean manic episodes. But bipolar means it's on two poles. Bipolar, when you are manic, you are high. When you are hypomanic, you low. So that person goes through that. But when you meet that person the next day and say, hey, let's go hang out, that person, oh no, everything is good. Right then you stop. Remember this conversation and say, I tell you what, I'm concerned. You told me years ago, for instance, that your father committed suicide and a cousin committed suicide. Right then, you try to make a behavior contract with that person and say to that person, if you continue to feel like this, call me. As a matter of fact, you mind me staying near you tonight or something, because that person had reached in their mind that I'm good, I made it good with my God, that I'm leaving because I can't stand the stresses, the anxiety, depression, whatever I'm dealing with, I can't deal with it any longer, what's going on in my life. So I always remember when that person says, I got it all together, right then you better stop and say, hold on for a minute, let me dig a little bit deeper. And that's showing that you really care about that person and what's going on. Because that smile you see then could be the last smile that you see that person by.
Wow.
And I just like to add to that. Running a state Medicaid funded program, one of the things that came down the pipe, maybe around between July and September of 2019, was that the state mandated for all child and adolescents providers that it was mandatory that we had to give what was called a Columbia Suicide Severity Scale rating scale. And so because between the ages of, I want to say about 13 and 17, is probably where you're seeing the higher risk of suicide or actually happening, right? And so you had very trained, licensed therapists going in one day with the child with, just a trained eye clinically and knowing what suicide looked like. And it's very different now, where I do agree with a lot of the symptoms that they give, but what we've seen lately is that we will see a young adult or teenager that is perfectly okay today, and then by the next morning, we've heard that this child has taken their lives. And so I wanted to say that, everything that, everyone has said on the panel is point on, but suicide is a very serious, serious issue. And especially, it just reminded me of the, what came down from the state office saying it's like a mandatory deal. When we come in, we want to see that suicide risk assessment sitting there completed. And if it rates at a certain level, then there needs to be a particular care plan or safety plan in order that we know what to do when A, B, C, D happens, not only for the therapist, but for the family themselves. So I just wanted to make that kind of comment of how serious suicide, is just pushed to the forefront in the past months.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And it's so important. And I pray that our members and our friends are really listening tonight, because especially in this season and time, there are so many who are already wrestling and struggling with that prior to COVID-19. And so even in the midst of this, I think we have to have a higher sense of awareness to look out for one another. Listen, we are over our time and we are already in overtime. So, but it's been a great conversation. And I pray that our members really just take away the fact that when it comes to mental health, they don't have to wait until they feel like something is wrong. They just like our physical health, and I'm saying this for me as well, we need to check on our mental health and really make sure that we are doing well mentally as well as we are physically. And I do believe that within the context of the church, that we must marry the two together. There must be partnership with spiritual guidance as well as professional assistance. That seeking mental health assistance doesn't mean that you are crazy. It really actually means that you're smart.
Yeah, that's right.
And you're wise. And you're taking full advantage of God-given opportunity to improve your state of mind. And so we need to do so. And so I thank y'all so much. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be a part of this conversation. I've been really looking forward to this conversation because I'm telling you, I tell my staff all the time throughout this pandemic, my greatest concern is the aftermath of this pandemic concerning mental health and really trying to navigate and move forward post COVID-19. And so I'm praying that this conversation, if nothing else, that there's this awareness now that, hey, I need to take responsibility for my mental health and do what I can to seek assistance and help. And so, and thank y'all again for as well letting us know the resources that are available, because part of the excuses as well is I don't have the insurance for it or I don't have the money for it. Just to know that even in spite of not having the insurance or the money, there are resources available to assist in those areas. So therefore, there are no excuses not to seek after it. So thank you so much. And so thank you again, Dr. Gordon. Thank you again, Dr. Murphy. Thank you again, Sister Monica Swain. Thank you again, Paula Sims. Thank y'all so much for your time. And Beulahland, give them a virtual hand clap. Thank you so much. Give them a shout out. Give them a shout out. Thank y'all so much for tuning in. God bless you. I hope you were blessed through this conversation. We weren't able to get through all of the questions, but I believe we were able to address some very relevant and pressing issues concerning mental health. And so again, we're thankful for our mental health professionals sharing with us today. Listen, before we close, you know that when we gather, we always want to make sure we have the opportunity to give. And so we want to invite you to sow your seeds tonight and give virtually, whether you use Secure Give or Givelify or even Text to Give. Using Text to Give, you know, the text the number 73256 and utilize the message Give BBC. Or you can go to our website, Beulahland.org, click the giving link, and you can follow the instructions and give that way. Or you can mail your tithe, your offering into our church, 1010 Newburgh Avenue, Macon, Georgia, 31206. But let's be faithful tonight. Let's give and sow to the kingdom of God. And again, once again, we thank God for so many of you who are being consistent and faithful and generous in your tithes, giving up your tithes and offerings. So thank you so much. Listen, a few announcements. First of all, on tomorrow, we'll be preparing for our food distribution that's going to be taking place on Friday the 17th. Now on tomorrow, we're going to be packing the food starting 8:30 a.m. And then on Friday the 17th, we'll be giving away food starting at 11 a.m. Now we are still in need of volunteers. And so if you are able to volunteer, I want you to go to the link that's on your screen. And if you go to that link, you can let us know when you can volunteer, and we'll be looking for whether you can volunteer Thursday at 8:30 or Friday. We need volunteers to show up from 8:30, start at 8:30. We'll prepare, and then 11 o'clock we'll distribute the food. It's an opportunity for us to be a blessing to our community, but at the same time, we get a chance to see one another and fellowship. And so it's just a great opportunity to be used by God and be a blessing to our community. Also, don't forget, this Sunday is Communion Sunday. That's right, this Sunday is Communion Sunday. So don't forget to prepare for virtual communion. Get your bread, get your juice, and we're going to go to the Lord's table together virtually. And again, that'll be this Sunday. Also on tomorrow as well, we're back with our prayer call. And so you can join us through the conference call line or on Facebook Live. We'll be sharing a brief devotional word as well as leading you in prayer. And so we are looking forward to that. Let's be in prayer for all of our bereaved families during their time of bereavement. I want to remember Minister Trayvon Sears and the passing of his uncle, Bishop Robert Jackson. Again, the Sears and Jackson family. Also want to remember in our prayers Tanya and Arthur White and the passing of her sister, Angela James. Also, we want to remember in our prayers Timothy and Linda Lewis and the passing of their sister, Fontella Lewis. As well, we want to remember in our prayers Brother Gregory and Minister Betty Pettis and the passing of his brother, Mr. Willie James Tillman. Again, we want to remember all of these families in our prayers and share our love for them. So again, we are thankful for you sharing with us tonight and hope and pray you were blessed through this conversation. And so let's close with a word of prayer over our gifts as well as our departure from one another. Father, we thank you for this conversation, God. Just like we look after our physical health and our spiritual health, I pray that we would be just as diligent when it comes to our mental health. And I pray that someone was helped tonight. And I'm praying as well that those who are wrestling and struggling will be open, honest, and will do what's necessary to reach out to get help, God. We're believing you for healing and deliverance. And we thank you tonight, God, just for being exposed to such informative and helpful information. Now, God, we pray your covering over our congregation and every person that is joining us tonight. We pray, God, that our lives are enriched, as well as, God, that we continue to grow in your grace. Will you bless the gifts that are given tonight, God, and will you bless every giver, God? Will you add to their lives? And we believe in you for favor. We look to you, God, because you're the source of our help and you are the strength of our lives. We ask it in the powerful and wonderful name of Jesus the Christ. Amen. God bless you. Love you. Have a good night. Until next time.